It's like one of 50 scandals of roughly that size in this past month alone. But you know, nobody got fired for it. And nobody resigned. Nobody got dinged. There were no consequences at all. And the American people disagree with that. The American people think at least somebody should have been fired for that signal thing, which was a big deal. This is from that Quinnipiac poll. Do you think someone in the Trump administration should lose their job over the Signal group chat incident or not? Yes, somebody should have lost their job over that, says 61% of the American public. 31% say no. But that means by a 30-point margin, the American people this week are like, wow, hey, yeah, that was a big deal and somebody should have been fired for that. But no one was fired for that. Now, though, a new CBS News report gives us a little window into what it's like at the upper echelons of this administration and what a tight ship they're running up there on their communications, especially with the people at the very, very top of the United States government. This is from CBS News. On March 3rd, several days before Atlantic magazine editor Jeffrey Goldberg was mistakenly added to a group chat with top Trump national security advisors, retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster received an unexpected call on his personal cell phone. It was from the White House. And he was instructed by the voice on the other end of the line to stand by for the President of the United States. McMaster had served as national security advisor during President Trump's first term. He was surprised to hear from Mr. Trump at all. But Trump opened the call by saying, "Henry," before launching into conversation. It was then that General McMaster knew this familiar voice was indeed Donald Trump, but he also realized something else. Trump had not intended to call him at all. General McMaster goes by HR, short for Herbert Raymond, not Henry. McMaster then said into the phone, "Mr. President, this is HR McMaster." Trump responded by saying, "Why the F would I talk to HR McMaster?" Quote, "The call was brief." Two sources telling CBS News that the president had actually intended to call South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, not his former national security advisor, who he hates, H.R. McMaster. Quote, "It is unclear who bears responsibility for dialing the wrong McMaster." And putting him directly on the phone with the President of the United States. That said, the White House communication director did respond to CBS News by giving them a statement caustically criticizing H.R. McMaster, as if any of this was his fault. So this is just a few days before Trump's new national security advisor put a journalist on a group text chat about the down-to-the-minute details of forthcoming U.S. military plans. Just a few days before that, Trump himself called up H.R. McMaster when he was trying to call a totally different guy named McMaster. And when the guy he actually called interrupted and said, "Mr. President, I'm H.R. McMaster," the president responded by saying, "Oh, why would I want to talk to you? Sir, you called me." I mean, can I give you another? I'm sorry, it's Friday. I have worn through my filter. I just cannot even with this being the government of the United States of America. But let me just give you one more. All right, this is also this week. You may recall that Trump appointed a pro wrestling executive named Linda to be the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, right? Turned out to be a weird job because both she and Donald Trump say that her job as Secretary of Education is to shut down the Department of Education. Kind of a strange job. Still, though, Linda McMahon, Trump's education secretary, found time in her busy schedule to go to a conference this week, a conference on artificial intelligence and American education. It's a whole conference about AI. Artificial intelligence, AI. That's what we call it, right? AI. AI. Unless you're Trump's education secretary. In case that abbreviation, AI, turns out that's a really hard one.
I think it was a letter or a report that I heard this morning. I wish I could remember the source, but that there is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's a wonderful thing.
You see the other people on stage with her going, she's the Secretary of Education. She's talking, wait, what are we talking about here?
Sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's a wonderful thing. Kids are sponges. They just absorb everything. And so it wasn't all that long ago that we're going to have internet in our schools. Woo! Now, okay, let's see A1 and how can that be helpful?
Now, I myself, I love me some A1. It's tangy. It really brings out the best in a steak or whatever. But A1, I mean, it's not like an education term of art, like K-12 or something, right? Or pre-K. You know what I mean? Like A1 is a whole different thing.
Internet in our schools. Woo! Now, okay, let's see A1 and how can that be helpful?
How can that be helpful? How can that be helpful? So this is an anagram that you spell out. It's not like NASA, where you don't say NASA, you just pronounce the anagram as if it's a word. This is the whole anagram spelled out. It's artificial intelligence, A and then I, AI, and she cannot spell that. So now we've got tangy, salty A1 in all the schools. And that will somehow be facilitated by abolishing the U.S. Department of Education, which, it'll be delicious. I mean, I can't. Everything they're doing is so terrible. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, we're going to be talking tonight about Social Security. We now know that one of the reasons, apparently, that they are tanking Social Security and destroying that agency and making it unusable and no longer functional for the people who depend on Social Security every month is apparently because they're stripping it down for parts. While Social Security recipients have not been able to get through to Social Security either on the phone or online or in person, and people are starting to miss Social Security checks, and they're firing thousands of people who work at Social Security, Social Security Agency has also reportedly converted the data systems from the Social Security Agency to be used as a way to target immigrants. So we can't get people their checks anymore, but Social Security Administration data systems are being used to target immigrants by having the Social Security system declare immigrants dead in order to mess with them and make it impossible for them to live. I mean, that's a thing that they're doing. In the Mahmoud Khalil case, the Trump administration has now admitted they have put in writing that the U.S. government under Donald Trump believes it has the right to target individual people and expel them from this country, not just on the basis of their speech, of the things they say, but of things they might say someday, or even that they might just secretly believe, or that they might in the future believe. Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, now claims that he has the right to expel people living in the United States legally. He has the right to expel people who are legally here, to make it illegal for them to stay, based on, quote, past, current, or expected beliefs, statements, or associations that are otherwise lawful. Expected beliefs or statements? They're saying they can tell in advance that at some point in the future, you are going to hold a belief that they do not like. And that is enough for the government to arrest you and put you in an immigration prison indefinitely before eventually maybe flying you to some other country. Expected beliefs and expected statements, things you have not yet said, will be used against you. We've got news today that the Trump administration is planning on closing down the National Severe Storms Laboratory, which studies storms like tornadoes, and planning on closing down every other research lab and research office at NOAA and the National Weather Service. And it is seemingly because they do not understand the noun climate. They do not understand that the word climate sometimes just means the weather. Doesn't always mean climate change. But because of the close association of the word weather and climate, they're planning on shutting down all weather research because they don't understand what the basic nouns involved are. Okay? And then there's Health and Human Services, run by Donald Trump's handpicked Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have fired 10,000 people from the nation's health agencies in the last couple of weeks. They have cut billions and billions and billions of dollars in health research and health programs. But apparently, somebody forgot to tell Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that that's what he was doing.
You propose more than $11 billion in cuts to local and state programs addressing things like infectious disease, mental health, addiction, and childhood vaccination. Did you personally approve those cuts?
No, I'm not familiar with those cuts. We'd have to go.
There's like more than 50 pages of, of cuts that I actually went through.
The cuts were mainly DEI cuts, which the president
There were a
ordered.
lot, but I'll give you, for example, about $750,000 of a University of Michigan grant into adolescent diabetes was cut. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, and that's something that we'll look at.
I'm not familiar with those cuts. Those cuts are mainly DEI cuts. We cut infectious disease and mental health and addiction. That sounds like a terrible idea. We cut adolescent diabetes stuff? Well, that's something that we'll look at. I thought these were all DEI cuts. As of today, all of the full-time employees at the vessel sanitation program at the CDC are off the job. Every full-time employee. What's the vessel sanitation program? It's the thing that fights noroviruses on cruise ships. At least a dozen outbreaks have been documented on cruise ships so far this year, sickening dozens or even hundreds of people at each one of those outbreaks. All of the full-time employees at CDC's vessel sanitation program are now off the job. Those are all DEI cuts. Are cruises gay? Because it's cruising? I mean, how does that work? How is it possible you have this job? But while Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claims to know nothing about the massive cuts he has made at the various agencies he runs, or maybe it wasn't him. Hey, if it wasn't you, who did them? One thing he does claim to be very engaged on is the ongoing measles outbreak in West Texas, right? One of the worst measles outbreaks this country has seen in decades. In fact, Kennedy this week personally visited the epicenter of the outbreak. He attended the funeral of an 8-year-old child who's died of measles there, the second kid that this measles outbreak has killed. Kennedy then posted to social media photos of him visiting with the families who lost children to the measles, as well as 2 of the doctors who had been treating them. He called those doctors, quote, extraordinary healers. He claimed they had, quote, treated and healed some 300 measles-stricken children using steroids and an antibiotic. One of those doctors had touted the same steroid as a cure for COVID-19. He said he had realized the steroid's life-saving potential thanks to divine intervention. He discovered that this steroid was a cure for COVID-19. He said, quote, while I was asleep, an answer to prayer came to me. Well, he thinks it cures COVID-19. He now also thinks it cures measles. It's the same medication. I don't know if it was the same dream or whatever. But it's basically an asthma inhaler that he says cures COVID and cures measles. And not to state the obvious, but asthma inhalers do not cure COVID-19 or the measles. Dr. Paul Offit is director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He tells NBC News that, in fact, steroids should not be given early in the course of a viral infection like measles because steroids inhibit the immune system. Quote, that's not what you want to do. Your immune system works for you to fight measles. But I think that inhaled steroids from an asthma inhaler cure COVID and cure the measles. That's one of the 2 doctors our nation's health secretary is endorsing for his miracle working in this out-of-control measles outbreak. The other doctor he's endorsing is a sort of rising star in the anti-vaccine movement who says mass infection with measles of the kind that we're seeing in this out-of-control outbreak in Texas is, quote, God's version of measles immunization. From an NBC News report this week, quote, Dr. Ben Edwards, a conventionally trained doctor who has shifted to promoting natural remedies and prayer, has been operating a makeshift clinic in Seminole, Texas, offering children unproven treatments, including, according to a video posted by an anti-vaccine group, quote, while he himself said he was sick with measles. So I know I've just said the word measles a lot, but just focus in on this for a second. What I'm saying here is actually what you think you heard. This is a doctor who advises against the measles vaccine and who is promoting these quack treatments. There is no treatment for measles, right? There's supportive care so that you hopefully don't die from it, but there's no cure for measles. Antibiotics and steroids aren't a cure for measles. But he's saying they're not promoting vaccination, instead promoting these quack treatments. And he is treating patients in this largely unvaccinated community in Texas, and he is doing so while he himself has the measles. Activists from RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine group, the one that he founded, went to this doctor's makeshift clinic in the middle of this measles outbreak, and standing there in his clinic where he was seeing patients and their families, he told them on camera that he himself was in the midst of a measles infection.
How are you feeling? Touch measles yourself?
Yeah, I was pretty achy yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you ever not have measles as a child?
No, I had MMR as a kid.
How many MMRs do you have?
I'd have to go back and look. I don't
But a
know.
few.
Yeah.
That doesn't work then, does it?
No, apparently not. Just wear off.
But you're feeling all right?
Today I'm better, yeah.
You've just spots here or on your body as well?
Just my face. Yeah. They came yesterday afternoon. I was achy. Friday afternoon, achy. Started, and yesterday was pretty achy, little mild fever. Spots came in the afternoon. Today I woke up feeling good. So, mild case.
You're an amazing human being, you know that? You should know that. Thank God for you.
I know.
We don't want to keep you up with your people.
I'm just doing what any doctor should be doing.
Just doing what any doctor should be doing. Again, that's a video from RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine group that he founded. I will tell you, this is what the CDC says about the contagiousness of measles. The CDC is an agency now run by RFK Jr. But if you ask them, what about the contagiousness of measles, they will tell you, quote, if you have measles, up to 90% of the people close to you who are not immune will also become infected. You can spread measles to others from 4 days before through 4 days after the rash appears. So there is this doctor in Texas who has active measles infection, who has spots on his face. He has just come down with the rash, he says, the day before. He is asking people in this highly unvaccinated community to bring themselves and their family members in to see him while he himself has just sprung his own measles rash. So you've got a guy who is basically a drinking fountain of measles in that very vulnerable community that is at the center of that outbreak. Dr. Edwards declined comment to NBC News, but our nation's new Health and Human Services Secretary, he says that Texas doctor, those two Texas doctors are, quote, extraordinary healers. This is unfolding as Secretary Kennedy has forced out the nation's top vaccine regulator. You may recall that when Dr. Peter Marks quit a couple of weeks ago, he submitted a resignation letter that called out what he called RFK's misinformation and lies. In an interview with the Associated Press this week, Dr. Marks was more specific about the reason he left. There was a confrontation. Quote, shortly before he was forced to resign, the nation's top vaccine regulator says he refused to grant Health Secretary Kennedy's team unrestricted access to a tightly held vaccine safety database, fearing that the information might be manipulated or even deleted. Dr. Marks agreed to give Kennedy's associates the ability to read thousands of reports of potential vaccine-related issues sent to the government's vaccine adverse event reporting system, but he would not allow them to directly edit the data. Marks telling the Associated Press, quote, why wouldn't we? Because frankly, we don't trust them, he said, using a profanity. He said, quote, they'd write it over or erase the whole database. So the nation's top vaccine expert says he was pushed out of the U.S. government because he was trying to stop RFK and his allies from corrupting the nation's database on vaccine safety. And now, at an all-for-show cabinet meeting in the White House this week, RFK told the cameras and told President Trump that he's going to announce to the nation the cause of autism by September of this year. Now that he's pushed out the vaccine expert and gotten access to the vaccine safety database, and put an anti-vaccine crank in charge of the quote-unquote study he's going to do on the totally, repeatedly debunked supposed link between vaccines and autism. I wonder what he's going to say causes autism. As for Kennedy's claim that he is going to have this whole autism thing sorted out in just a few months, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network says in a statement that it, quote, demonstrates his disregard for scientific studies as, quote, real science does not move at that speed. They add, quote, when top officials spread misinformation about autism, autistic people suffer. And the top vaccine regulator is not the only top health official Kennedy's fired. When I spoke last week with former FDA Commissioner David Kessler, Dr. Kessler said that among the people Trump and RFK have just fired was the doctor who very well may have saved Donald Trump's life when Donald Trump got COVID during his first term.
Remember that night that he was taken by a helicopter to Walter Reed? Mm-hmm. He was having difficulty breathing. He had COVID. He was very sick. Right? He was given 2 monoclonal antibodies. Right? He referenced those as miracles. They were cures. All of a sudden, he got better. I mean, he could have died, but for those drugs. Dr. Peter Stein's office approved, made available those drugs to the president and to thousands of others. Peter Stein was fired, was let go. I don't think the president knows that. Someone needs to walk into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, we just fired the person who may have saved your life.
Dr. Peter Stein, the guy who very well might have saved Donald Trump's life with those miracle cures, the real ones, monoclonal antibodies. He's one of about 10,000 people that Trump and Robert F. Kennedy have fired at the nation's health agencies. But, you know, don't worry. RFK said a few days ago that a whole bunch of those people were fired by mistake. They're all going to be hired back. It was all a big misunderstanding. You might remember this, right? RFK told reporters, quote, personnel that should not have been cut were cut. We're reinstating them. And that was always the plan. Part of the, at Doge, we talked about this from the beginning, is we're going to do 80% cuts, but 20% of those are going to have to be reinstated because we'll make mistakes. Well, that was always the plan. Kennedy said that the elimination of the CDC's entire lead poisoning prevention and surveillance branch was among the mistakes. So you might have seen the coverage of that a few days ago, right? Oh, Kennedy admits we cut the whole lead poisoning prevention office, by mistake. That sounds bad. That was a mistake. It was a mistake, but it was also part of the plan. Those are the kinds of people we'll be getting back. Did you assume that meant that those people were coming back? This is the part where the big narrator voice comes in and says, they did not get those folks back. Headline, RFK Jr. said HHS would rehire thousands of fired workers. That wasn't true. A person familiar with the department's plans tells Politico that, quote, HHS has no intention of reinstating any significant number of the staffers fired, despite Kennedy's assertion that some had only mistakenly been cut. Kennedy's vow to rehire workers, quote, surprised White House and HHS officials because there were no such rehiring plans. The employees are not expected to be rehired. Instead, it became the latest disheartening episode for a workforce that had held out hope that some cuts would be reversed. So they're not bringing them back. As for the people who do remain at HHS now, how are things going for them? Quote, RFK warned Food and Drug Administration staff about the influence of the deep state on the agency in an all-hands meeting today, Friday, where he also made off-color comments about children with developmental disabilities. FDA employees gathered at the agency's headquarters for a viewing party to watch the FDA commissioner and HHS secretary who spoke from a separate room in the same building. The meeting quickly turned to warnings of the deep state and the influence of the CIA, according to audio and transcripts obtained by Bloomberg News. Kennedy told HHS staff, quote, the deep state is real. He said the FDA, like other agencies, became captured by the industries they're supposed to regulate. He said the agency turned away dissidents and people who touted alternative medicines. Like, say, people who discover miraculous cures for pandemics in their dreams. And then it turns out they think it's the cure to everything. or people who say that instead of the historic public health victory that we've had off mass measles vaccination, we should instead go with God's version of measles immunization, which is just everybody gets measles. People like, you know, the guys who set up clinics for unvaccinated measles patients and their families and then treat them while they themselves are infected with measles, one of the most contagious viruses on the planet. Yeah, for too long, such people have been turned away by America's health agencies. But not anymore, apparently. Now they get to destroy the U.S. government's health agencies and take over themselves. It's Friday. There's a ton to get to, I know, but Lord have mercy. Stay with us.
Did they just hop from a baseball game to a show on Max without leaving DirecTV?
It's like all